Forget everything you learned in your high school history class. Forget the romantic paintings of brave European explorers stepping onto an untouched, empty wilderness. The true story of America does not begin with 3 wooden ships arriving in 1492. In fact, when Christopher Columbus stumbled onto the shores of the Caribbean, he did not discover a new world at all. He stumbled into a post-apocalyptic survivor zone. Imagine telling someone in the 11th century that the greatest cities on Earth were located in Europe. They would probably laugh in your face. While London was a filthy, overcrowded town, struggling with disease, and Paris was just starting to pave its muddy streets, the North American continent was thriving at a massive scale. It was a land pulsating with life, sophisticated trade, and stunning engineering marvels. Today, we are going to tear down the persistent myth of the empty continent. We will explore the bloody, brilliant, and ultimately tragic truth of the empires that existed long before the first white man ever set foot on American soil. Let's set the record straight about the population. For centuries, historians painted a picture of North America as a vast, empty hunting ground, populated only by a few scattered, wandering tribes. This was a convenient lie. It made the bloody conquest of the continent seem less like a hostile invasion and more like simple real estate development. But modern archaeology tells a terrifyingly different story. Before the European arrival, the Americas were home to tens of millions of people. Some modern estimates suggest the population of the Americas was actually greater than that of Europe at the time. They were not just wandering aimlessly through endless forests. They were radically terraforming their environment. Native Americans invented one of the most brilliant and sustainable agricultural systems in human history, known as the Three Sisters. By planting corn, beans, and squash together in the exact same mound of dirt, they created a perfect biological synergy. The corn provided a tall, sturdy stalk for the beans to climb. The beans pulled vital nitrogen directly from the air to constantly fertilize the soil. And the broad, heavy squash leaves shaded the ground to retain precious moisture and stop invasive weeds. This was not primitive farming. This was highly advanced agricultural science, perfected over many generations. And this massive, reliable food surplus allowed something incredible to happen: the birth of the American megacity. To understand the true scale of what was lost, we have to travel to the floodplains of the Mississippi River, just across from modern-day St. Louis. Welcome to the year 1050 AD. Welcome to the great, sprawling metropolis of Cahokia. If you approached Cahokia by river 1,000 years ago, your jaw would hit the floor. You would not see small campsites or simple villages. You would see a sprawling urban metropolis, covering 6 square miles, home to up to 20,000 people. The air would be thick with the smell of roasting venison, burning hickory wood, and the sweat of thousands of laborers. You would hear the constant rhythmic sound of craftsmen chipping flint and carving lightning conch shells imported all the way from the Gulf of Mexico. The streets were organized, the neighborhoods were bustling, and the sheer scale of human activity was staggering. The Cahokians did not build with stone. They built with earth, and they were the greatest earth movers the North American continent had ever seen. At the dead center of the city stood a colossal structure known today as Monk's Mound. This was not just a random pile of dirt. It was a perfectly engineered, terraced pyramid that towered 100 feet into the sky. To build it, workers carried over 22 million cubic feet of soil in woven baskets on their backs, step by painful step. Let me put that staggering achievement into perspective for you. The base of Monk's Mound is actually larger than the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. At the very top of this massive artificial mountain stood a massive wooden temple. Here, the paramount chief, believed to be a divine brother to the sun, ruled over his vast domain. From this high point, he could look out over a city of more than 100 smaller mounds. He could see massive grand plazas used for elaborate religious ceremonies and brutal sporting events. He could also see a complex astronomical observatory made of giant red cedar posts, which archaeologists now call Woodhenge. Just like Stonehenge in England, This wooden circle perfectly aligned with the solstices and equinoxes. It proved that the Cahokians had a profound, highly accurate, mathematical understanding of the cosmos. Cahokia was the shining center of a trade network that stretched across the entire continent. Copper came down from the Great Lakes in the north. Mica was brought from the Appalachian Mountains in the east. Exotic shells and teeth arrived from the southern coast. It was a thriving cosmopolitan capital of a vast Mississippian culture. It was a beacon of civilization in the ancient world. But here is the darkest mystery of all. By the time the first French explorers floated down the Mississippi River in the 1600s, looking for wealth and new territory, Cahokia was completely gone. The grand plazas were overgrown with thick wild grass. The majestic wooden temples had rotted away into nothing. The Great Monk's Mound simply looked like a strange overgrown hill. The bustling metropolis had become a silent ghost town. What happened to the greatest city in North America? How does a metropolis of 20,000 people just vanish into thin air? Historians and scientists have debated this heavily for decades. There was no single apocalyptic event. There was no massive volcanic eruption or sudden meteor strike. The truth is much more complex and perhaps much more terrifying, because it serves as a dark warning for our own modern cities today. Before I reveal the grim evidence found hidden in the soil, let me ask you a question. What do you think destroys a powerful empire faster, a massive foreign invasion or a silent internal collapse? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And please hit that like and subscribe button for more untold history secrets. By the late 1300s, the climate began to change drastically. A period known as the Little Ice Age brought severe, unpredictable weather to the region. Massive, prolonged droughts struck the Mississippi Valley. When a city relies entirely on agriculture to feed tens of thousands of mouths, a multi-year drought is an absolute death sentence. The crops failed, the once fertile fields turned to dry dust. The surrounding forests had already been stripped bare of timber to build the city's massive wooden palisade walls and to fuel the endless domestic fires. Without trees to anchor the earth, the heavy rains that eventually followed the long droughts caused catastrophic flooding, washing away the carefully cultivated topsoil forever. As essential resources grew incredibly scarce, the delicate social fabric of Cahokia tore apart. The archaeological evidence we have today is incredibly grim, and it points directly to violent internal conflict. Archaeologists excavating Mound 72 made a chilling discovery. They found a man buried on a cape, shaped like a falcon, made of 20,000 marine shell beads. But surrounding him were the bodies of over 250 people, many of them young women who had been ritually sacrificed to accompany him into the afterlife. Furthermore, mass graves have been discovered containing the bodies of young men who were brutally killed in civil unrest. Some skeletons show horrifying signs of decapitation and blunt force trauma. The people completely lost faith in their Sun King. If the divine ruler could no longer control the rain or guarantee the harvest, what good was he? Slowly, desperately, the starving population abandoned the great city. They broke apart into smaller, nomadic groups, spreading out across the plains to survive. The empire did not fall to foreign invaders. It consumed itself from the inside out. When the Europeans eventually pushed westward, centuries later, and saw these massive earthen pyramids, their deep prejudice blinded them to the truth. They looked at the local Native American tribes and arrogantly concluded that these people could not possibly possess the engineering skills to build such monumental architecture. In the 19th century, white Americans actually invented wild, baseless conspiracy theories. They loudly claimed the mounds were built by wandering Vikings, or ancient Hindus, or a lost tribe of Israel, anyone but the indigenous people standing right in front of them. It was a deliberate, calculated erasure of history designed to legally justify the taking of the land. The story of Cahokia and the great pre-Columbian empires is a story of profound human achievement and devastating environmental collapse. For centuries, the North American continent fell quiet. The forests regrew, the great earthen pyramids slept under a thick blanket of green. The descendants of the Mississippians adapted, creating rich, diverse cultures across the plains and coasts. They learned to live in a delicate balance with nature, a balance born from the painful lessons of Cahokia's fall. But this fragile peace was a ticking clock. The isolation of the Americas was about to end in the most violent way imaginable. Because, while the Native Americans were adapting to their land, a restless, greedy, and heavily armed empire, on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, was aggressively looking for a new route to India. One morning, the horizon broke. The native people, standing on the white, sandy beaches of the Caribbean, looked out at the ocean and saw something impossible. 3 massive wooden structures floating on the water, with giant white sails bearing the Red Cross of Spain. The men who stepped off those boats did not just bring steel swords. They wore shining metal armor that reflected the tropical sun, and they carried weapons that exploded with the sound of thunder. But the steel swords and the terrifying war horses were not the true threat. They brought an invisible, silent killer that would trigger the most devastating demographic apocalypse in all of human history. What exactly did these Europeans bring with them, and how did it brutally wipe out 90% of the population? We will uncover that terrifying nightmare in the next episode.